Hello, everybody. This is R.K. Mullins, author of Time for a Serial Killer, A Lifetime of Murder. Hey, remember now, Confessions Before Death, Satan's Revenge, coming out February the 14th, Valentine's Day. Every Valentine needs a good murder in their life, right? Even if it's fictional. And it's my mother's birthday. Help me remember my mother and honor her memory. If you're not going to buy my book and you don't want to read it, that's fine. Just think about my mother. Good enough for me. Hey, any kind of honor, anything to honor my mother's birthday is always a good thing, as we all should honor our own mothers, right? Well, today on Author to Author, we have Mr. William Glass. He is a soccer coach and an author. Now, I was, like I usually am, pardon me, y'all, not smart enough to ask him the title of that darn book. That's my fault, like I always do, right? Hey, I always said I was intelligent. I never did say I was smart, right? Yeah, I'm just no Southern boy. Well, we're going to introduce, I'm going to switch everything over to Mr. Glass and let him talk about himself, and nobody can give a better introduction of themselves than themselves, right? So over to Mr. Glass. Tell us about yourself and your book, sir.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on board today. This is really exciting. It's just great to be here talking with another author. You know, I really don't get the opportunity to do that much because in the circles that I run in with soccer coaches, soccer officials, traveling to different soccer games and things like that, I really don't get the opportunity to go to many literary events. So this is great. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to write my book, which is called As Good as Can Be. And it's a novel. It's a novel, but it's largely based on my life growing up in a crazy military family. So I've had a lot of fun promoting this book because I keep running into people who had similar experiences to what I had.
Right.
Other Army brats or military brats.
Mm-hmm.
So this morning I went to church at our beautiful Trinity Lutheran Church here in Fairfax, South Carolina, and our pastor had just finished reading the book.
Nice.
Now I told the pastor this book was about a true sinner, a boy that grows up in a military family.
Mm-hmm.
He's considered to be a wayward, rebellious child from the get-go. Some of his teachers, even his father, his siblings, think that he might be retarded, actually.
Okay.
But as we go through the book, we learn that he's just got a few learning disabilities and actually has a very high IQ. Now that we kind of figure out as we go along.
Right.
But in the story, the family travels from one country to another, one military base to the other. The father's a colonel in the Army. He's in the Signal Corps, which means that he's doing a lot of intelligence work. So his job is often to spy on the Russians, who are the main enemy during the Cold War,
Right.
which is when this book takes place. Okay. So at the outset of the book, the family's living in Iran. The father works in the embassy where he has installed all these radio antennas up on the roof to capture Russian military radio traffic. Now, the border of Russia is only about 200 miles from Tehran, maybe 300 miles at the most. So they're able to pick up all this radio traffic coming from the Russian military. So that's the way the story starts out. And as it progresses, the family moves from Tehran back to the United States to a military base in Kansas called Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Then they move over to Germany, to beautiful Heidelberg, Germany, just a beautiful city.
Right.
And And people who've read the book tell me that the descriptions of these different places, whether it's Tehran, whether it's Fort Leavenworth, and especially Lake Heidelberg, Germany, a beautiful world famous tourist destination. People tell me these descriptions in the book of these places take them there, and they feel like they're there on the scene, experiencing the city and what's going on there. And of course, that's really rewarding to me. The pastor of our church this morning was telling me his father was a military officer, and he grew up in a very similar way to the way I grew up. And they actually lived in Heidelberg when he was a young man or a young boy. And he told me my descriptions of that town and that area and life in the military was very interesting for him, and brought back all those memories of when he used to be, living there with his parents.
Right. Now, is this 100% more considered to be a memoir of your life and times growing up as a military brat, as you put it, or is it more along the lines of a truth-based fiction?
That's a good question. And actually, you hit the nail on the head. This is truth-based fiction. The closest similarity to this book might be The Great Santini by the great Pat Conroy. And right. I certainly don't consider myself to be in a league with Pat Conroy when it comes to literary acumen. However, he did base his novels, his fiction, on his life story.
Right.
Whether it was his time as a military brat, in this case, the Marine Corps, whether it was his time working as a teacher out on one of the barrier islands of South Carolina, or whether it was his time at the Citadel, where he played basketball. And that's one of my favorite books of his, My Losing Season, where he talks about his year playing basketball at the Citadel. But yes, in answer to your question, it is autobiographical fiction. And that's kind of interesting, topic to get into as one author to another.
Right.
In that, why would you not just make it a straight up memoir if it's 90% true, right?
We are, as authors, I've discovered one simple fact. We write the stories that we write that we want to tell, that we think that we enjoy, even if it's about our lives. And if we're doing a portion of our lives mixed with a little bit of fiction, we believe that actually will enhance the story itself. Or at least that's my belief, my thought.
Right.
And from what you're telling me, I think you believe we're around the same category there.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I was just going to say that, the advantages of making your story quote unquote fiction,
right,
is it gives you plausible deniability.
It does. And it also gives you a freedom that you don't have if it's 100% biography.
Yes.
If it's an autobiography, or if it's a memoir, you are held within those constraints of those memories, and those.
Yes.
You cannot escape from them. But if it's got some fiction to it, you got some freedom to work.
You have a ton of freedom. You can kill off boring characters.
Exactly. Mainly me.
kind of like your books about mass murder. You can have one of your characters murdered if they're troublesome to write about.
That's true. I can, but so far I haven't had to do that. But
right.
every single one of my books, Time for a Serial Killer, Lifetime of Murder, it gave me the opportunity, y'all. I wasn't planning on doing that, but every single one of my books have two major things in common. They all must have three major twists that are totally unpredictable. They just happen randomly. And they also must have an unpredictable ending.
Okay.
Nobody's been able to predict the endings to my books.
Well, that is wonderful, and it makes it a really exciting read for the author and for the readers who want to come back and definitely read the next book in the series, right?
Exactly. Where you kind of compare yourself to that one great author, right?
Yeah.
Writing, who also wrote a little bit of truth and a little bit of fiction rolled into one. I don't compare myself to anybody. Plain and simple. I'm an old Southern boy, and I just wrote a story and hope somebody else would like it. I figured, hey, if I like it, somebody else might have to, right? Maybe. But some of the reviews I've got have been very, very nice. I mean, one reviewer compared me to Stephen King and Tom Clancy. I find that to be absolutely a great compliment. I don't compare myself to either one of them. I think they're great authors in their own right, and I can't compare to that. It's been compared to Basic Instinct with a twist, been compared to Criminal Minds, a TV show. I find that to be high honors when anybody can, whether they're talking about me or any other author, it doesn't matter. When a reviewer can compare our work to successful authors or successful movies or TV shows, we can't ask for anything better, and we've done our job, in my opinion. What do you think, Bill? I mean, William?
Well, I totally agree. And, my background was in marketing. I worked in marketing for 30 years before I started coaching soccer. And I worked for some of the biggest marketing firms in the world, really. And what I really learned after all those years of marketing is you can have the slickest promotional package, the best advertising, the most compelling advertising, the biggest ad budget. And if your product stinks, it ain't going nowhere.
Exactly.
Speaking like an English major, it ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, well, welcome to my world. I don't speak like I barely speak Southern, much less English.
So the product, so as an author, getting a great review as you have for your books, is in a way a burden, because it tells you, okay, now I've got to get out and promote this book and get people to read it, because I know I've got a great product. I'm offering the reader a great experience.
Yep.
And it would be a crime not to get out and make people aware of the book.
Exactly. And everybody who's all the positive that I've received all said the same daggone thing. I want to see this as a series. At no point did I ever tell them it was going to be a 10-book series.
Right.
But it's all about different serial killers. Whereas with your book, are you planning a second one, or are you planning to write anything different? What's going on with you in the writing world?
Well, I have completed a sequel, and my publisher says don't call it a sequel because it's a standalone book. You wouldn't have to read the first one to read the second one, so I better not call it a sequel. But I've written another book that follows the main character in As Good as Can Be. It follows him into the next stage of his life. And the second book is going to be called Night's Plutonian Shore. And I hope it's going to be coming out here in, probably May, June timeframe, something like that. It's been written, like your book. I just contracted. You have another book coming out shortly. I know that where you just contracted with an editor. I just
Exactly.
signed a contract with an editor to put the finishing touches on my book,
Right.
my sequel, Knights Plutonian Shore. So, yeah, it's really good to be able to do that. And I was just thinking about what some of your readers have said about your books, that they put one down and say, I want to read the next one. This has to be a series.
Yep.
And in my case, I was just going to say one thing that I've enjoyed hearing from readers is
Yes.
hearing them say, this ought to be a movie. This is like a movie with
I
all the twists and turns and everything.
Exactly. And I've had several of the people who have bought my book and then put a review up on Amazon that have all said this reads like a movie. It needs to be one, and which is
Yes.
it's a great.
Yes.
I mean, it really is. Not too. Everybody would love their book to be turned into a movie or a TV series or something of that nature, so that
Right.
we could actually see it on screen and
Right.
enjoy it that way. And people could enjoy
Yes.
it. We do. Because I don't know about you, but I kind of imagine it probably might be the same way. When you're writing, when I'm writing a story, it's like I'm seeing it for the first time in my mind. And I'm seeing a movie that nobody else has ever seen. And sorry about that. I need to turn that dang thing off. But I'm seeing a movie that nobody's ever seen before. I'm the first one to ever see it.
Right.
So
That's a lot.
seeing it on screen.
I was just going to say that's a lot like soccer coaching, in that as a coach, you have in your mind how you want your team to play.
Right.
You're on this, soccer's played on a big field. You have 22 players out there. Soccer people call it a pitch. Okay, it's played on a big field though. You got 22 players out there. Once the game starts, the coach doesn't have a lot of input into the game.
Right.
So everything is done in practice. And the coach has a vision in their brain of how they want that team to play.
Yep.
And it's very similar to what you're talking about, where you have this vision in your mind of your story, the story that you want to tell, and now you have to use your own creativity to create that world for your readers.
Exactly. And just like Mr. William Glass here, hey people, take a look at it. I do have my own book in my own hands. All right. I usually don't show it, but I figured, what the heck, I better show it sometime or another, right? But you said that the second one is, you consider it to be a sequel, but your publisher says it's a standalone, right? Like mine.
It is yeah.
Like my book.
Go ahead.
Every single one of the books in the series I've got can be a standalone. Right. You don't have to in order to be able to follow the second or the third or whatever. Even though they all tie into one another, the tie-ins are so subtle that it doesn't impact the story to where you lose something. Now, how is it, since this your second book? What is the name of that one? What are you naming that one?
Okay, the second book is going to be called Knights Plutonian Shore.
Interesting.
And that title comes from an Edgar Allan Poe poem.
Yep.
And but the main character in my book and in the sequel is the same character as Dave Knight, and the name of this army family, they are the Knights. The father is Colonel David Knight.
Okay.
So there's a scene in the second book. This is not a spoiler.
Good. We don't do spoilers. We go over the rules every
I know you went over the rules with me. I got it. Okay. No cussing, right?
Well, I try not to, but every now and then I slip. But I try not to.
But anyway, in this scene, it's pretty short, I can tell you.
I
Uh, Colonel Knight and his son Dave, who is now an adult, about 25, 26 years old, Colonel Knight is visiting him and they're playing chess. And Dave has never beaten his father at chess. The young Dave has never beaten his father at chess. And they're playing. His father's an alcoholic. He's having some drinks and having fun.
all right.
And they're playing. And all of a sudden, Dave loses his queen to his father's knight. Okay.
All right.
Now, Dave is stunned because he was winning. So he counts the moves that his father's knight just made. He
Right.
rewinds in his brain to figure out where that knight started and how it ended up taking his queen. And he figures out that his father moved that knight one square more than it was allowed to go.
But it's cheating.
He was cheating. So Dave's line is, Dave looks up at his father, who's a big time bridge player as well, a grandmaster bridge player. Dave looks up at his father and he says, do you cheat at bridge as well? And his father, far from being chagrined, just sits back and laughs and says, what do you mean cheat? That was my knight's Plutonian shore move. That's where that title comes from.
I love the way you play. I love the way you played that title in there. That is.
My publisher doesn't like my titles because they're not descriptive of the books, but to me, it's hard to write descriptive titles that are descriptive of these sprawling narratives,
Well, and I look at it this way: every author titles their book their way, and the way they want
right.
that title to be.
Right.
Every title means something to the author, especially if it's a truth-based fiction or autobiography fictional.
Right.
Those titles are definitely 100% all you, and they mean something to you. It doesn't necessarily have to mean something to anyone else or be descriptive to what's inside the pages, at least in my opinion. But I'm not a publisher. I know.
I'm glad we're recording this because I'm going to send it to my publisher because you explained that. You explained that perfectly, much better than I could explain it.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, like I said, you're going to get links to everywhere I put this thing. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all the places. So you be my guest, send it to whoever the heck you like.
Oh, I'm going to share it with everybody.
Please do. I mean, like I said, during our little chat prior to the show, the more people that my guests share this video with, the better off we all are. That way, maybe they might not buy my book, they might not buy his book, but they might buy one of the author's books that's been on our program.
Sure.
I'm doing this, because I want to try to make $1 million or anything like that. If I did, I'd just, go play the lottery. I'd be better off, right?
Well, a lot of times when I'm doing interviews and things, I tell people, go check it out at the library. If you don't want to buy it, just read it, because we wrote it to entertain you.
Exactly.
We're trying.
If it's being carried by a particular library. Some libraries
That's
don't.
Right.
I mean, I don't know why, but they should, but hey, who knows? My book.
That's my angle, though. That's how I end up selling a book. They go to the library and request it. Now the library's got to buy it. Now I made a sale. Yes.
I didn't think about that one. That's a good angle. I like that. I might have to get them people. But I'm up on Kindle Unlimited. So that means anybody who has Kindle Unlimited, they can get my book for free. And
that's awesome.
Still get paid for it. I get a percentage of, or cost per page from Kindle for that. So, I mean, I'm not losing
Yep.
out, and you still get a free book because you've already paid for the,
Yep.
membership. And I think that every author should be up on Kindle Unlimited, but for that particular purpose. But, people, I say this every single show, and I'm going to say it on this one just as much as I do any other show. Just because our books do not have that orange banner on Amazon that says we're a bestseller doesn't mean that the books aren't worth reading. It just means we haven't sold enough to be up on that big old orange banner. But if that's as far as you're going to look, is on the bestsellers list of Amazon, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, or whoever, if that's the only place you're ever going to look for books, you are sorely missing out on some great reads. Trust me. So many of us authors out there, there's too many authors out there that write books that barely get read by people, all because readers don't want to go past the bestsellers. These are the great writers. These are the great authors. Hey, they've sold a lot of books. They've got to be good. Not necessarily, but just because somebody hasn't sold a lot of books or got a lot of reviews doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad book. It just means you ain't ready yet. Give it a shot. Right, Will?
Well, I mean, I agree totally. When I'm out, in bookstores doing signings and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
I just really love talking to the book lovers that are coming through, and you have the opportunity to talk with them a little bit,
Right.
and they talk about how much they just love books,
Mm-hmm.
love to get immersed in a story,
Oh, yeah.
how they love that feeling when they come to an end of a book and wish there was more.
Oh, yeah.
It's like what they call a driveway moment, when you come home from a long trip and you're listening to the radio and there's a song on the radio. And even though you've been driving for 8 hours or something, you don't get out of the car till that song's over, and you're kind of sorry the trip's over. You're sorry the trip's over that you don't get to listen to more songs like that. And it's the same feeling at the end of the book that book lovers really enjoy. So I think book
Right.
lovers who are really hip understand your point, which is that the major publishing houses act as gatekeepers to keep, and they are totally focused on what sold last year. So if what's selling is young adult dystopian uh, novels like The Hunger Games, they're
Yeah.
going to reject everything that it doesn't fit into that category.
Yeah.
And they're going to publish bad books that do fit into that category and reject good books that
Yeah.
don't. So now it's up to the author to go out and make readers aware, hey, here's a great book that you would love reading, that you would find yourself immersed in,
Yeah.
that would take you into a different world where you would just not be able to turn the pages fast enough. You'd be so eager to get on to the next part of the story. You'd
Yeah.
start reading at 7 o'clock at night, thinking you'd read for a couple hours, and then watch a TV show, and the next thing you know, it's 1 a.m. in the morning, and forget that TV show. You're going to finish that book.
Right. The one thing I don't like to hear, and I hear this a lot of times from readers. They'll read a story from a particular author, and it'd be a great story, a wonderful read, and kept them engaged the entire time. And then they'll read another one, and they're like, and they can't get into it. It's falling apart. It doesn't have anything. Just doesn't have the glue to hold them to the pages. And then they'll read, they'll put that down or they'll finish it, and they'll read another one, hoping that from that same author, hoping to get back to the first one. The kind of read that they had on that first book. Sometimes authors, in their diligence to get a book out, in my opinion, don't do their work properly to get the story out there and to make it engaging to the readers and hold them to those pages. That's one of the reasons why I started writing in the first place. I got tired of reading boring books that were 500 and 600 pages long that spend a chapter describing a dad burned tree I ain't gonna be seeing in the book later on. It don't have no meaning. Doesn't have any rhyme or reason to it. My book's only 178 pages. Short book. It's 60,000 words. It's a novel. They said, I didn't know that. I thought I was writing a short story, to be honest with you. I was told it was a novel. Okay, great. But I wanted to write a book that was going to be a page turner, that was grab the reader from the very first page and hold them to it to the very end. And I think this is my personal belief. I think it's every author's job to strive for that. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We're in the entertainment business.
Yes.
And, we're there to give the reader a great experience.
Exactly.
And if they open the book and from page one, it's got to grab them and hold them. One of the nicest things I heard about my book is I gave it to a friend of mine who works in a furniture store, and he's a salesman in a furniture store. And a lot of times there's no customers coming through. So he reads a lot at the store. So I gave him my book to read, and he finished it. It took him about 10 days to finish it. But he told me that he'd go home at night and leave the book at the store and be thinking about the book all night. Couldn't wait to get back to work to read it the next day.
Oh, yeah.
And that was music to my ears.
It is. It very much so is. I mean, any author should be, if it's not. Unfortunately, there are authors out there that are writing for the money. In my opinion, that's a bad mistake.
Right.
And writing for the sheer pleasure of telling the story and entertaining our readers as well as ourselves now. Come on.
Right.
We
right.
got to read it as we're, believe it or not.
Right.
And I've read books where I'll read a page or a chapter or even a paragraph, and I'll be scratching my head like, what the heck was they talking about?
Well, you see some of these covers, on websites, and the covers look like they came off of an assembly line. It looks like all the same cover. It always has this. It always has this guy on there with no shirt and like an 18 pack, and some young lady hanging on him. And the title, the only thing different is the title. Everything else is the same. And are they writing those books in order to tell a story, to engage the reader, as you put it, to be thought-provoking and maybe even give the reader some different perspectives on life situations or anything like that? Or are they just writing those to sell books?
And I can't answer that. I mean, I have my suspicions, but again, like I said, authors different. My suspicions don't mean jack. Now, and we hear agents and publishers talking about, looking for new and exciting voices, right? And it took me a while because I'm like, I'm writing a story. Where's the voice at in here? It ain't doing an audio, right? I didn't get it, but I get it now, and it's all about the writing style of that particular writer and how they put it across for the reader. My writing style is conversational dialogue and action driven. All of my books are straight up that way. And you will, I know it's a grammatical mistake not putting the quotation marks in there when you're switching from one speaker to the next. But mine is all about two people talking 98% of the time in the book. Very little monologue, a lot of quotation marks is going to make that book look really daggone stupid. So I have no quotation marks in my book, or very few, because I'm always going from one character to the next, talking to one another. And if we stand out there, like me and you're talking right now, right? If we're standing, the readers watching this show, they're hearing us talk. Do they see quotation marks? No, they don't.
Yep. Nope.
And when we're having an engaging conversation, they're hearing that conversation back and forth. That's the way I write. That's my writing style. My question to you is, what is yours?
Well, you and I are a lot alike.
Nice.
And what's kind of interesting is, you and I might have similar backgrounds as writers. I don't know, but I was not a creative writer, didn't take any classes in creative writing or anything like that, but I just got a story in my head that I wanted to tell.
Right.
And the first book I wrote took about 10 years to write from beginning to end. I got halfway through it and threw it out. I couldn't stand it. I got to where I wouldn't work on it anymore because I hated it.
Right.
So I just took it and threw it out and started with a blank page. And I had to learn on the job what we used to call OJT.
Exactly.
So you learn on the job that you got to write an engaging, entertaining book. If you get a lot of exposition in there, where you got paragraph after paragraph with nobody talking, no dialogue, no nothing, where you're setting things up,
right.
You're going to bore the socks off of your reader. So
I agree.
What I found myself doing a lot is when I went back and rewrote this thing was having characters talking to each other, setting up the scenes,
right,
rather than spelling it out and giving the reader credit for being able to follow along with the dialogue and picture the scene. And you know what? It worked.
Give the readers credit for being smart enough to be able to read between the lines that we ain't putting there, y'all. Plain and simple. And we don't have
exactly.
We don't spell everything out because we want your imagination to do it for us. Because if we get your imagination working, then we've done the job that we're supposed to do in the first place. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. We are more alike than you think. I started Time for a Serial Killer in '98.
Okay.
I lost that manuscript so many times, emailed it to myself, still lost that sucker.
Right.
Writing it in 2012 and finished it. I didn't even look at getting it published until 2018.
Right.
I didn't actually publish it until 2020, last year. Everybody was talking about how 2020 was a bad year. People, that's been one of the best dang years I've ever had. I can tell you that real quick. I don't like COVID, and I wish it'd never come around just like anybody else does. But I had a dang good year. Not financially, but I still had a dang good year. And this year starting off to be a really good one as well. All right, now, quit dang phone. Sorry about that, y'all. And please, but we got a little bit more in common than he thinks. I mean, I did not take a creative writing class in college. I took a interview and an interview class where I ended up teaching this daggone class, to be honest with you, on how to have a proper interview. My instructor was so impressed at that time that when I went in there, he's like, "You been in a class like this before?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, how do you know how to do all this stuff?" I think it's common sense. The thing that's sensible about common sense people. And I took a class on writing resumes, winning resumes. That's as much writing class as I ever took. One thing that, if you look at my website and you read the about author, you find out I didn't learn to read until I was 25. I could read up to a fourth grade level, but anything beyond a one syllable word, I was pretty much SOL. And but I was taught by a professor in a local community college how to read. She spent 3 months teaching me how to read. And I went on and built from there. I mean, I've got a lot of great people in my life that guided me. And I'm sure, as well as you, most of us have people in our lives that guide us through things. And it sounds to me like you've had quite a few that's guided you, and some of them not so much guiding as maybe misguiding.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this might be an area where you and I are a little bit different because as I have confessed, the main character in my novel, As Good as Can Be, is a wayward child,
Right.
a troublemaking boy who everybody thinks is retarded, right?
Correct.
But he figures out, and we've admitted that this is autobiographical, right? So what this main character figures out is he learns to read early. Mm-hmm. And he does it because even though he's got a lot of learning disabilities, he's got a great memory. And he memorizes this children's book, this golden reader that his father would read to him every night.
Right.
And by memorizing that book, he's able to figure out words. When his father reads the word "and," he can look in the book and see A-N-D, and that's how he learns to read. So he becomes just a prolific lover of books, read in order to avoid all the negativity around him, because his teachers are giving him feedback like, you don't belong in this school, you belong in a school for retarded kids. His father's saying, did somebody drop him on his head or what?
Well, I
his siblings, I was just going to say, he's got 4 brothers and sisters who are all taking turns beating him up, and so he escapes into books.
Right.
And I think the best preparation for me anyway in writing, if I admit that I'm kind of like this character who just read thousands of books growing up, is I think the thing that really helped me get prepared to be a writer was all the books I read along the way.
Well, see, I was just the opposite. I was that wayward kid that took the wrong path. Remember, I told you I wrote a short story that has been picked up by a United Kingdom publisher, correct?
Yes.
That short story.
That's great news.
Thank you, sir. That short story is called The Drunken Savior. It is a true story about my life. A small portion of it, about a small portion of it, and the man that I credit to saving my life. And the reason I credit him to saving my life, he helped me by teaching me things I didn't know at the time that ended up keeping me from going further down the path that I was going. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Jail or death or something along those lines. It was not a very good path to be on. But it is a true story. When it does come out, and it's coming out, I'm not sure when. That's going to be up to my publisher. But when it does, when they give me a launch date, I'll be letting you all know about it. All right.
Well, I'm definitely going to want to read it because it sounds a lot like, what I experienced growing up. My computer's running out of gas. I got to plug it in. Hang on.
All right.
All right. I think I put some more gas in the computer. It's working again.
You plugged it into electricity and not gas.
But just talking about your book that you have coming out, and this is a nonfiction book that you have coming out from the UK publisher.
It is a memoir.
Right. And I just wanted to pick up on that point for a minute about the main character in my book actually does go to jail twice in the story.
Right.
He does some things that if he'd gotten caught,
Mhm.
he would have ended up in jail.
Right.
So, admitting that this book is somewhat autobiographical, I would say that I would say that you and I had some similar experiences in life. We
What's
were
that?
both we both followed a kind of a wayward path, but I never had that mentor that you had. And I really just continued my wayward ways until the person who kind of turned me around was my wife.
Well,
And go
I
ahead.
would call him a mentor
Right,
because he tried to change the things I was doing at the time. He
right,
just he taught me some stuff that later on sank in, but didn't sink in while he was alive, unfortunately, and helped shape the man that I became.
right,
And but at the same instance, it was a parasitic union.
right,
Both of us using one another for what we wanted at that time. Uh,
right.
I won't go into it because number one, my publisher probably get all over me about it. But like I said, it's called The Drunken Savior, and when it's getting ready to launch, I will definitely be announcing that. William, it's been great having you on the show. Unfortunately, we got to cut it down. We went way over time, people. I will not apologize for it because I have a good author to talk to, right?
Right.
Hope everybody enjoys this show as much as we did. William, take a brief minute, tell them the name of the book, show us that cover one more time, and when's your next one coming out?
All right. Thank you very much. And this is my book. It's called As Good as Can Be by William A. Glass. It's out now, available on Amazon. You can buy it on Kindle. You can also buy it just about anywhere books are sold. Okay. And the next book is coming out probably June. It's going to be called Night's Plutonian Shore. And thank you so much for having me on your show. I have really enjoyed it.
William, it's been my pleasure. It's always my pleasure when I have an author on the show that's very engaging and very informative. And you've been all of that, and we've had a blast. I've had a ton of fun on there. People, remember this. Plain and simple, William Glass, and his book, what was it called again?
As Good as Can Be.
I love the cover on that one.
Thank
Now,
you.
like I said, all right, this is my show, my rule, right? Hey, there it is, people. That's it. Time for a serial killer. A lifetime of murder, right? Don't forget now. This is R.K. Mullins, author of Time for a Serial Killer, A Lifetime of Murder. Confessions Before Death, Satan's Revenge, launches February the 14th. Every Valentine needs a little bit of murder in their life. That's my mother's birthday. Help me honor her memory. If you don't buy my book, think about my mother. Hey, come to my Facebook group, Authors to Authors. You know, it does have a plural on that last one, right? And post in there if you want to. You know, wishing my mother a happy birthday. You know, she's no longer with us, but anybody who remembers their mother in any form or fashion is doing their parents and their mother a great honor. Plain and simple. And we all should be, right? All right, y'all. This is R.K. Mullins again. I'm out of here.